answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crying in the streets. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
Pat Tillman loved the game of football. Yet he loved America even more.
Pat Tillman was the most famous enlisted man in the military.
He thought that going into Afghanistan was the right thing to do.
Times like this, you stop and think about just how good we have it, and the flag is a symbol of all that.
Pat Tillman, who gave up a multi-million-dollar contract in professional football, has been killed.
Tillman ordered his men up a hill to attack terrorists that had pinned down part of his platoon.
Tillman's voice was heard issuing commands to take the fight to the enemy forces.
Tillman's family will receive the Silver Star.
Pat sacrificed himself so his brothers could live.
I knew that things were going to come out that were going to make that ceremony invalid. They had told me, you need to keep your mouth shut about it. I was told, your career is on the line.
And when somebody tells me something, in the Army you salute and, about face and go get it done.
What they said happened didn't happen, and so you have to set the record straight.
Danny committed herself to trying to figure out exactly what happened to her son.
People start asking questions, and then all of a sudden the Tillman story changes.
I just remember Pat yelling his name. I'm Pat Tillman. Why are you shooting at me?
Every piece of evidence that could ever be used is eliminated.
All the generals were lying.
I can't be sure. I can't tell you. It's a guess. I don't know. I don't recall precisely how I learned that he was killed.
This goes pretty damn high.
To find out that the military were the very people to lie to us, it's outrageous.
Yeah, there it is, Larry. That's the trailer for the Tillman story. That's a new documentary coming out about the death of Pat Tillman, and it's going to be released August 20th, so that's like 2 days away, right, Larry?
Yeah, Friday.
Yeah. And it's directed by Amir Bar-Lev, and you can check it out at tillmanstory.com. It's a great website, a bunch of information about Pat Tillman. And so tonight on the conspiracy segment, we're going to look into the death of Pat Tillman, because there's all kind of stories about what happened, and was it a greater conspiracy? Was he assassinated? Larry. But the two things to keep in mind here: there's definitely a conspiracy about Pat Tillman. But the conspiracy was to cover up what happened to him. The government conspired to hide the truth that he died in a friendly fire incident.
Right.
If you remember at the time, Larry, this was back in April of 2004, and it was a rough time there for the Iraqi war. A lot of bad press coming out. The Camp Gitmo stuff was in full swing about how they were treating the prisoners down there. And also the Abu Ghraib prison, the abuses done there. So the military was in dire straits. And then Pat Tillman dies in this incident here, and they right away they tried to make it sound like he died a heroic death, which he did. He still died a heroic death, but they tried to make it like he was fighting the enemy insurgents, and he ran up this hill and saved all these people's lives by gunning down enemies, and he died in the valor of charging up a hill to fight the enemy. And that's really not what happened. But the other thing people should remember is he still died a hero because he was very brave in what he was doing over there. And there's a lot of misconceptions about the Pat Tillman. So maybe we'll just start at the beginning. How much do you know about the Pat Tillman, Larry?
Not a whole lot. He played for the Arizona Cardinals, and he was killed in the war.
Yeah, that's pretty much a lot of people know. But Pat, he was born November 6, 1976 in Fremont, California, so we're both older than Pat Tillman, Larry.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, he was only 26 when he died.
Good Lord.
Yeah, how does that make you feel? All right, so in 1994, Tillman began his college playing career at Arizona State University, and despite being undersized at only like 5'11", 200 pounds, Tillman won Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year and he was a linebacker in his college days, you know. So it's not a big guy to be playing linebacker. So obviously you're not going to be playing linebacker at that size in the NFL, you know. So he impressed the Cardinals, though, and Dave McGinnis was their coach, I believe, at the time. In the workouts, he really showed off how hard he worked and how smart he was and stuff, so they took a liking to him. So the Cardinals, because he's went to Arizona State, they're like, hey, we'll take a flyer on this kid. And they took him in the 7th and final round of the 1998 draft with a 222nd overall pick. They pretty much only thought he'd be like a special teamer, but Tillman pulled him aside, the coach Dave McGinnis, and he said, hey, if you work with me, I want to be your starting safety. And sure enough, that's what he did. He started 10 games in his rookie year, and he eventually became their full-time starting safety. In fact, in the 2000 season, Tillman set an Arizona team record with 144 tackles. And hey, think how many fantasy points that'd be worth, Larry, in our 32-team league.
Oh, that'd probably be like 1 million points right there.
Yeah. He was also named to the Sports Illustrated NFL All-Pro team for that year, so that's nice. All-Pro safety. But that same year, after the big success there, St. Louis came with the contract offer to Tillman, and they said, we'll give you a 5-year deal worth $9 million. And keep in mind, the Arizona Cardinals, they stink, Larry. They're lousy. They've always been lousy. They lost the Super Bowl recently, but back in those days, they were just awful, Of course, this wasn't my buddy Jake Plummer was there, though, so he was cool. But the Rams had just won the Super Bowl like a year prior, so they came to Tillman and they said, we'll give you 5 years, $9 million, come play here in St. Louis. Who wouldn't jump at that, right, Larry?
I would.
Yeah, not Pat Tillman. He said, no, thank you. I like the fellas here in Arizona. I want to be loyal to my coaches and my teammates. They gave me the chance to play in the NFL when no one else would. I want to stay here in Arizona. And so instead of taking that contract with the Rams, he signed a 1-year deal worth $512,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is devotion.
Yes, it is. But that's the kind of guy that Pat Tillman was. He's very loyal, and he stood up for his principles, and he did what he thought was right, and it didn't matter what anyone else thought. Now, after the season in 2001, the September 11th attacks affected him quite a bit, as they affected a lot of Americans. And, in fact, we have a clip of Tillman speaking. I believe this was recorded on September 12th, 2001. I think it's on the soundboard. It's just Pat Tillman, Larry. I think that's the clip, so I'm going to play that one.
My great-grandfather was at Pearl Harbor, and a lot of my family has given up, has gone and fought in wars, and I really haven't done a damn thing as far as laying myself on the line like that, and so I have a great deal of respect for those that have and what the flag stands for.
Yeah, so there it is. He was determined to make his mark there in the world and with the military. So he finished out the 2001 season, and after the season, the Cardinals offered him a 3-year, $3.6 million contract. Still not anywhere near what the Rams were offering, but it's still a nice chunk of change for the Cardinals, I guess. And Pat Tillman said, thank you, but no thank you. I'm going to go join the Army. And Pat and his brother Kevin, who was 2 years younger than Pat, in May 2002, they went and they signed up for the Army. They enlisted. They each signed a 3-year commitment, and they entered the Rangers, the U.S. Army Rangers program there, and they both succeeded, and they passed the test and whatnot. And they joined up with the 75th Ranger Regiment. In the Rangers, Larry, they're serious dudes, It's not just
you don't want to mess with them. Right.
Yeah. It's, elite soldiers, the Army Rangers.
Unless you're talking about the New York Rangers, then you can go ahead and mess with them.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want with them. No, nothing's going to happen. But the U.S. Army Rangers, you don't want to mess with them. So both Pat and Kevin joined up, and they're Rangers. And Pat had just gotten married like weeks before he signed up, or even days before he signed up. So he didn't even have a lot of time to spend with his wife before he went away. And their first deployment was in Iraq. And Pat wanted to go to Afghanistan because he thought the war in Afghanistan was legit. Of course, back then a lot of people were swept up in the emotion of the war. I thought, I thought the wars were justified. A lot of people thought the wars were justified just because of the terrorism, and we all bought into the government line. But once he got over there, he saw what was going on, and he had to change of heart. But he still thought they should be in Afghanistan to get the terrorists who he thought were responsible for the Al-Qaeda and the attacks. And once again, if you've listened to our show long enough, you know that that's all nonsense, the Al-Qaeda. It's a CIA invention, and it's all bullshit, but we'll save that for another day. But so Tillman and his brother, their first deployment is in Iraq, and they were actually involved in the Jessica Lynch. Do you remember that Private Jessica Lynch who was rescued?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they were part of the supporting perimeter force that was around the hospital, and they went in and rescued Jessica Lynch. And of course, a lot of people still don't know this, but that whole thing was just nothing but propaganda. It was a staged event.
No shit.
Yeah, the Jessica Lynch, if you remember the story, she was supposedly like a female Rambo who was standing up for these Iraqi soldiers, who was gunning down the enemy when she got injured, and then the U.S. Rangers had to go in there and rescue her and take her out. Well, it didn't really happen that way. Jessica Lynch her crew were ambushed, and she was severely injured, and she never even got off a shot because her gun jammed with sand, so she wasn't fighting like Rambo or anything like that, as they portray it. And the rest of her company were killed, and yet you never hear any of those guys mentioned. And she's very upset about this when she found out that, those guys were heroes, they were doing what they could, and they all died. Why don't you make, superstars out of those guys? But she was in that Iraqi hospital, and the Iraqis tried to give her back to the U.S. The nurses there, they're taking care of her. They said, hey, we'll give you, you want to go back to the U.S.? We'll let you help. We'll help you out. And the U.S. said, no. We're going to come in and rescue her. That's really what happened, Larry. They staged the whole thing just to make it a big propaganda deal to whip up the Americans, fighting spirit.
Support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's shameful conduct. So Pat Tillman, he saw this firsthand, what was going on, and he wrote in his letters back to the family and stuff, and he was talking with his fellow soldiers, and he said, don't you ever let them do that to me. Like, if I happen to die here, I don't want to be paraded around in the streets. Don't let them hold me up as some poster boy for this war. And he told everyone who would listen that he thought the war in Iraq was illegal. And that's a lot of. If you listen to Fox News, and during the time, they just try to portray him as like a good like a soldier right with the Bush administration, a Christian right, and he was always. Pat Tillman was an atheist. He didn't believe in the God, and that's fine. And but he wasn't with the Christian right. He wasn't George Bush's little puppet. He was his own man. And at 26, he was an extremely well-read fella. He was smart. He was intelligent. He graduated Arizona State with a 3.8 grade point average in summa cum laude. He wasn't just some meathead jock. He was a smart kid. And some of his favorite authors were like Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he was actually a big fan of Noam Chomsky, a philosopher and political activist who was really outspoken about the Iraq War. Noam Chomsky is one of Tillman's favorite writers. So when he was in the war, he wrote to one of his pals who worked at MIT, where Chomsky was at the time, and he said, can you set up an appointment with Noam Chomsky for me? After I get out of here, I'd like to talk to him. And sure enough, he did, and Noam Chomsky said, yeah, I'll meet with Pat Tillman after he gets out. And a lot of people think that Pat Tillman was going to become a vocal anti-war spokesperson, really speak out against the war with Chomsky's help. So that leads to people thinking, well, maybe that's why he was rubbed out, because he was going to become this anti-war spokesperson. So who knows? But yeah, but a lot of people, like, right when this happened, I still remember, even on the radio here, I don't even want to say the guy's name, but our buddy Mark Madden in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And he said some really awful things about the Pat Tillman and his mom, and but they try to portray him as like a goofball jock who wanted to play Rambo, and then he died for it, And that's not what happened at all. Pat Tillman was a good fella. He was smart. He was intelligent. He was a thoughtful, caring fella, and he was loyal to his friends and his country. And he did nothing wrong. He was doing all right here. He is an actual legitimate hero because he was a strong man who did what he thought was right. So don't let anyone talk bad about the Pat Tillman. He's a good kid. Now I'll get back to the actual timeline of the events. So he was involved in the Jessica Lynch and whatnot, and then his second deployment started in April of 2004. Once again, Kevin and Pat, they're in the 75th Army Regiment there, and they're in the same platoon, and they're deployed this time in Afghanistan. And their job is to sweep the villages and towns along the Pakistani border, clear them out from insurgents. And the way they did it, they grid out the area in little blocks, and they send them through, and you got to clear out each section. Just kind of, I don't want to say regimented, but they had a little plan, and they send them through there, and they check them off a list. And back at the command control center, they have a little checklist. Oh yeah, we got to here, we got to this quadrant, bang, bang, bang. They go right down the checklist, Larry. See, and that's how they tell if the Army's being efficient. It's if they hit so many checkpoints in a certain amount of days. It's just all nonsense, and they don't care about the soldiers. They just care about meeting their bureaucratic deadlines and stuff. It's all just a big, bureaucracy. and red tape and nonsense. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that leads in to his death. It plays a big role in his death. Because on April 22nd, that was his last day of Pat Tillman's life, 2004, his platoon, they were saddled with a broken Humvee. And they just wanted to get rid of it and just blow it up or leave it there. But the commander said back at, now these are guys who aren't there with them. They're back in the control center. And the two leading guys were Captain William Saunders and Major David Hodney. They were the officers in control of Tillman's platoon. They were the guys giving the orders. They wouldn't let them just leave the Humvee because I guess, they're always thinking of the bottom line and the money and whatnot, that we can't waste the Humvee, And they tried to fix it. They even flew in a fuel pump, and they couldn't get it fixed. And they're stuck in this town called Magaraha, M-A-G-A-R-A-H, Magaraha. And they're stuck there for 6 hours during the daytime, so it's kind of a security risk that they're still being a static target in daylight in a foreign village like that. So, we got to do something. We can't just stay here all the time. So why don't we just leave this Humvee and just go about our business? Because they're supposed to go to a town of another Mana, M-A-N-A-H. They're supposed to go there to a little village of Mana and clear that out. That was their next goal, their next checkpoint that they had to go to. And the commanders back at the base there, they said, no, you got to take that Humvee with you. And the guy in charge was Lieutenant David Uthwalt, U-T-H-L-A-U-T. He was only 24 years old, yet he was in charge of their platoon, Tillman's platoon there. And he said, well, can you, fly in and airlift the Humvee out and get it out of here? And they said, no, we're not going to do that. Because once again, they're probably thinking about the bottom line and how much that would cost. So, what you're going to do, this Captain Saunders, he tells Uthwalt, you're going to hire a local Afghani tow truck, and you're going to tow that Humvee up to a road where we can meet with another U.S. wrecker, like a U.S. Army tow truck, and we'll haul it back to the base. But you have to get it to the main road because they can't go through all the villages and come get it. So they're like, all right, we'll do that. But he says, we're going to go as one. It's going to slow us down if we're towing this Humvee, but we're going to stay together, all right? And Captain Saunders said, no, you're going to split up because we want to have boots on the ground by dusk in Mana, that little village, because they got to meet their quotas. They got to meet their deadlines, and it's all just nonsense. There's no urgency to do it. But he says, no, we want you to split up. And young lieutenant, the 24-year-old kid there, he's trying to do his best to say, no, we can't do that. It's going to pose a risk. And his officers are saying, no, you're going to split up. One of you are going to get to Mana, and the other one's the other group. You're going to take the Humvee and meet up with the other tow truck there. So, but if they divide like that, they only have one. They only have one satellite radio thing. So they're going to risk not having radio communication. And they weren't equipped because of the way the trucks were armed. They'd only have one 50 caliber cannon on one of the trucks. They wouldn't be able to have equal firepower in both segments. So they were concerned they wouldn't have enough protection in either one or enough weapons to clear out that village if there are insurgents there. But the officials didn't want to hear anything about it. They said, just do it, See there? That's where the bureaucracy gets in trouble. They don't care about the soldiers. They just want to meet their little agendas. So, just do it anyway. So they divide up into the two platoons called Serial 1 and Serial 2. They divide the platoon up. And Serial 1 is Pat Tillman's in that one. And so is the 24-year-old lieutenant there, David Uthwalt. And in Serial 2 is Kevin Tillman and some other fellas. And it's about roughly 26 Rangers in the first one, 17 in the second one. And they divide up. Pat Tillman's group leaves about 10 minutes earlier. And then Kevin Tillman's group follows, Carrot with the broken-down Humvee. And Pat Tillman's group is supposed to go through this narrow canyon, come out the other side there, and then go into the town of Mana. And this canyon would be a perfect place for an ambush from insurgents because it's very narrow and almost sheer cliffs on either side, and there's hills all around and stuff. So they're nervous going in this canyon, but they make it through with no trouble. No one says that. Although when they were back at the original town waiting to go through, they got a tip that there might be an ambush on that route. But they went ahead anyway. And there was no trouble for Pat Tillman's group. Now, coming up in Kevin Tillman's group 10 minutes later in this Serial 2 there, they were supposed to take a different route. But the tow truck, the Afghani tow truck, it couldn't get over the road because of all the craters and the potholes and the whatnot. So they had to follow Pat Tillman's group. And they couldn't tell them this because they didn't have radio communication, Larry. It wouldn't work. Yeah. So, but they decide that's the only way they can go because the truck can't make it the other way. So they go through the canyon as well. And right away, the guys there are saying they just felt something was going to happen because it just was the perfect spot for an ambush. It seemed eerie. Kevin Tillman says there was just a weird feeling about it. And sure enough, an insurgent fires. The Army tries to say it was a mortar, but it was probably just an RPG because it hit the opposite hillside there, like on the cliff wall. And a mortar would imply there'd be more people needed to fire and stuff. And it was pretty much, I think it was just 3 insurgents is the leading hypothesis with an RPG. And it missed. And that's all the firing that it really had towards the serial 2 there, the second group. But right away, these guys, you got to keep in mind, they're exhausted. They're frustrated with the day's events. They're running low on supplies. It's getting towards the evening. The sun's starting to set. And they're just really frustrated and worn down. So they overreact a little bit. They all jump out, and they just start unloading on the hillside, trying to get to the insurgents who may not even be there. And they just start firing tracer rounds up the hillside there. And the first group, Pat Tillman's group, they're through the canyon already, but they hear this going on, and they try to make contact. But again, there's no radio transmission between the 2 groups. So they need to know what's going on. So the commander of this platoon, they divide it up. Some of them go down towards the mouth of the canyon, and then a couple other guys go up on the hillside to try and lay cover for their buddies there and take out the insurgents. And Pat Tillman is one of those fellas. He goes up with a guy named Brian O'Neill, and he was only 19 at the time. It's Brian O'Neill. And they take with them an Afghan militia soldier. And that may have been one of the reasons there's a problem here. Because apparently when they go up on the ridge to spot for the insurgents, the guys down below in the second group, they saw the Iraqi militia guy with Tillman and Brian O'Neill. And they say they confused him for an insurgent because he was carrying an AK-47. But he was wearing a U.S. Army uniform. So, but I don't know. So they shot at him, and then kind of all hell broke loose. But instead of me trying to explain it, we have a clip of Brian O'Neill. And why don't you play that, Larry? It's about 3.5 minutes long. This was at a hearing with the Government Oversight Committee. Representative Henry Waxman was the chairman. So that's the guy. The other voice you'll hear is Waxman. So why don't you play this clip, Larry, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Is your phone beeping?
Yeah, so I'm going to switch phones, too, while we're at it.
All right.
Tell us, in your own words, what happened right before and after Corporal Tillman was killed. Walk us through this in as much detail as you can recall. What was Corporal Tillman doing at the time? Was he trying to signal that this might be friendly fire? Was he signaling with his arms? Was he yelling? What was he saying? Could you just tell us about it?
Yes, sir. When we moved into our final position, Pat and I and the Afghan militiamen had decided, or Pat decided, that we were going to continue to assault, and he wanted further guidance from the squad leader that was controlling our element. So he left myself and the AMF soldier, and when he returned, he basically let me know that we were going to continue moving in the route that we were. And before he was able to finish telling me what our plan was, we had started to receive fire from a GMV. At first it was short, sporadic. I didn't really understand what was happening. I looked and saw that it was friendly fire coming towards us. Pat asked me basically what was going on, and I let him know. And it didn't take long before those in the GMV who were stopped at the time to dismount and open up on us with the 50 caliber machine gun and the 240 Bravo machine gun, and basically shot at us in waves or bursts of rounds. At that time, I felt myself become limp, and I got down. I had no cover, and there was nothing blocking my slouching the people at the Humvee shooting at us. I know Pat had was able to get himself behind some cover, but it was not much. I basically was yelling, waving from on the ground as much as I could, and I believe Pat was too at the time because he was behind me, and talking to him, yelling, screaming, trying to figure out what was going on, when he told me he had a plan, and he, at the time I thought, popped a pen gun flare to signal the troops down in the GMV that we were friendlies. But I later discovered he had popped a smoke grenade, and after he had done that, the firing ceased in the truck. So we had both believed at that time that the shooting was over and that they had recognized us as friendlies. And we both stood up, faced each other, was kind of wondering, hey, what just happened there? Wow, it was an accident, luckily, we're both still alive. It didn't take long after that, sir, before they moved into a better position, as I said, in the GMV and started shooting at us again. And at that time, both of us had gotten down. I was watching them do that, and I could hear Pat calling, stop shooting, Pat effing Tillman, stop shooting, over and over and over again. And I could hear the pain that he had in his voice, so I had known that he was hurt at that time. And it abruptly stopped with him calling for help, and it wasn't too long after that before the truck had moved out. So I laid on my side for a while, wondering what had just happened, because I was young and I didn't really understand. When I discovered there was a large pool of blood forming up around me.
Did you have any doubt at that time that it was friendly fire that killed Pat Tillman?
No, sir, I'm 100% positive that was friendly fire.
Yeah, Larry, am I back on?
Yeah.
All right, so there he is. Now, you heard him say GMV. That's just a military term for ground mobility vehicle, so it was just the truck that was in shooting at him. And right away, there you hear it. And that hearing took place in 2007, 3 years after the incident. But they knew right away it was friendly fire that killed Pat Tillman. There was no doubt about it. Everyone knew it. And within days of the incident, within like the first day, they burned Tillman's uniform and his vest and stuff because they wanted to cover it up that it was friendly fire. Because U.S. rounds, they would leave green markings on clothing when they were shot, like they're tipped with something that leaves a green marking. So they knew all along that it was friendly fire that killed Pat Tillman. Yet the official story, right away, they told the family that he was killed by enemy fire. And they made up a story about him rushing up the hill and shooting the enemies and whatnot. Then 5 weeks later, the truth finally started to come out. But they knew all along. And if it wasn't for Pat Tillman's mom, Mary, and their other family members, she kept after them, they never would have admitted what happened that day. And it's just shameful, shameful behavior. But they did it to try and, once again, it's for propaganda and publicity and to help the war movement when it was nothing but bold-faced lies. And they knew it all along. And the guys responsible for it were General Stanley A. McChrystal. He was the commander of Joint Special Operations Command in Afghanistan at the time. And he wrote up the recommendation for Pat Tillman to receive the Silver Star for valor because he's the guy that concocted the story about guys running up the hill. And they even took witness statements, and he changed them, and they altered them to remove any references to friendly fire, to make it seem like the enemies did it. And our buddy Donald Rumsfeld, he was the guy leading the charge, too, to do this. It goes right to the top. And, I doubt George W. had knowledge of this because he was kind of spacey. But Rumsfeld and McChrystal, they knew what was going on, and they condoned it, and they kept doing this to the family. And don't think for a minute that Pat Tillman's the only guy that this happens to. The military covers up a lot of friendly fire deaths, and they concoct these stories. And it's all just, they lie to families all the time. Now, once again, the thing that leads people to think, well, was this a conspiracy? Was Pat Tillman assassinated? Was he a definite hit? Like they took people in and they said, hey, you rebel Pat Tillman. They think because he was an anti-war, he's going to be an anti-war spokesperson, and the Bush administration was leery of this. They didn't want to get him out because Tillman had been writing letters to his family telling them that it's an illegal war and that all they're doing over there is protecting poppy fields, so the heroin trade out of Afghanistan. And we mentioned that he wanted to meet with Noam Chomsky. So all this stuff's flying around that, well, maybe they rubbed him out. And they burned his uniform and his vest. They confiscated his diary, and I still don't think anyone's gotten his diary yet. They haven't released it. So this all breeds conspiracy, like, oh, maybe he was killed that way. And then the way he died, he was shot. He died because of 3 bullet holes in the bullet wounds to the forehead in close proximity. And in the original story that the military, when they finally admitted it was a friendly fire incident, they still didn't tell the truth. Because they still said, they tried to come up with all these reasons why it happened, like the lighting was bad, there was an intense firefight going on, the soldiers got confused in the middle of the firefight, and they shot at Tillman from a distance of about 3 football fields or something, like all these mitigating circumstances, and none of it's true. There wasn't a firefight going on at all. They just got confused and trigger happy, and there were no insurgents there. Like, they went back and they tried to find casing shells from enemy rifles. There was nothing there. No evidence that there was a firefight at all. The only firefight was U.S. soldiers onto Pat Tillman's position. That was it. And they, in order for the 3 bullets to hit him in the forehead like that close proximity from the kind of weapons they're using, they had to fire him within 10 meters. Like, it wasn't like 3 football fields. It was, 30 feet. And the whole time, Pat Tillman and his buddy, they're saying, ceasefire, ceasefire. They're giving the symbol, they're waving. They throw up a purple smoke grenade to let them know it's a friendly position, yet it still happened. So, at worst, it's gross negligence and a criminal act of murder. But it wasn't, I don't believe it was an assassination. That's just too much to say that was a part of the conspiracy. And the only legit conspiracy that I can see in this is that the government conspired to cover the truth of what happened. And that, you can't argue that. That is proven, that they lied to him. And they tried to give Mary Tillman, his mom, they tried to get her off their back. They just sent her a crate of like 2,300 documents or something. I guess they thought she would never read them. And she did go through them, and she read them, and she started finding all these errors and mistakes and discrepancies in the reports. And she just kept after him and kept after him. And so now we're getting this documentary in 2 days called The Tillman Story, which everyone should try and see. And you'll see how the government lies and manipulates the media and just for propaganda, and they keep pushing this war. That's absurd. And I just saw today that the U.S. troops are leaving Iraq for the last of the combat operations. Of course, these same soldiers will be deployed in Afghanistan now, and there's still private contractors there, and that just means private army. So it's not over yet. But I'm interested in whether this was done now, if this has anything to do with Tillman, this movie coming out in 2 days. If this is just going to distract from that, who knows? But and another thing to keep in mind, Captain Richard Scott, he conducted the first investigation just days after the incident, and he found that there was gross negligence, and he recommended a criminal investigation. But Scott's report disappeared, Larry. Just miraculously disappeared. They lost it. And the doctors who first looked at Tillman's body also said it looked like a criminal investigation to be conducted because it was far beyond just accidental friendly fire. It was gross negligence. Now, who were the 4 people shooting? It was Sergeant Greg Baker. He was the guy in charge of that GMV with the guns and whatnot, and he was leading the way. Specialist Stephen Ackpole, Specialist Steve Elliott, and Specialist Trevor Alders. Once again, for it to be a conspiracy of an assassination conspiracy, these guys would, be the guys doing it, and they were just young kids in their 20s. And they weren't, trained assassins or snipers. And they've all been bumped out of the army. 3 of them are out of the military altogether. But none of them were really ever punished too severely for what happened that day. And the wounds in Tillman's head were consistent with the M249 squad automatic weapon fired by Specialist Trevor Alders. So he was probably the guy that actually killed Pat Tillman. But it's just a sad story of just. In wartime, the guys overreacted. They got in a firefight. The adrenaline was running, and they didn't follow their training. They didn't follow the rules of engagement, and it resulted in Pat Tillman's death. His buddy O'Neill, Brian O'Neill, he was wounded, and the Afghan militiaman was named Sayed Farhad, and he died. He was shot 8 times in the chest, and he died as well. And the same guys who were doing the shooting, they also unloaded on that village that was nearby. Even though they never got any fire from that village, and there's mostly women and children in that village, they still unloaded on. And in that portion of the assault, they also wounded the lieutenant, the 24-year-old lieutenant we mentioned earlier. He got shot, took shrapnel in the jaw, and another kid was also wounded, shot in the knee. So, but again, the government lied about it. They covered it up just to push the war effort. And but there's no, for there to be a conspiracy as far as the assassination goes, there's just too many moving parts. There's no way they could have controlled it. And again, the guys doing the shooting weren't. Their backgrounds don't suggest that they were capable of pulling off anything like that. So it was just a horrible, horrible accident in war. And the only conspiracy is that the government lied and was evil towards the Tillman family. And if you want to research more about it, Larry, a couple of good resources for you. Again, the Tillman story, the movie's coming out in 2 days. Go to tillmanstory.com. Historycommons.org is a great website. That's a bunch of archived news stories, and just Google for the death of Pat Tillman. You can also Google for the article, The Fog of Fame, Pat Tillman is Everyone's Political Football. by journalist, investigative journalist. You should call him Stan Goff, Goff. ESPN.com. They actually did good work. You don't say that a lot about ESPN. But Pat Tillman and Un-American Tragedy by Mike Fish. There's a lot of good stuff there, including actual documents of interviews soldiers did. And a couple books, Where Men Win Glory by John Krakauer. It's about Tillman's death. Now, the Tillman family, some of them, they don't like the way Krakauer portrayed a lot of stuff, but still, you can check it out. And then Boots on the Ground by Dusk is by Mary Tillman. She wrote that book. And once again, that's responsible really for what happened that day was the officials, the government officials, the commanders, trying to force an agenda that really there was no urgency to accomplish this task. But they wanted to have boots on the ground by dusk, so that's why they split the platoon, and that's why the chaos reigned that day, and that's why Pat Tillman's dead. Because just in case you're wondering, Larry, those commanders, they didn't get punished either. In fact, they got promoted later. So don't worry about those guys. That's just the way the government works. No one cares. Yeah, no one cares. So there's the Pat Tillman conspiracy.
Maybe they were 49er fans.
Yeah, and the thing about Pat Tillman, the more I read about the guy, the more I like. He seems like just a great guy. He's 26 when he died. 26.
Yeah.
What the hell are we doing, Larry?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing at all.
Yeah. Just sad. Anyway. All right, so that's Pat Tillman.
All right, Mike, we're on a show.
But again, the Tillman story, don't forget about it. It's TillmanStory.com, 2 days, check it out. It's going to be at Sundance, or it was at Sundance or something, I don't know, so try and find it.